On the morning of March 15th, 2025, rain drummed on the windows of the Hartwell construction office in Portland's industrial district. In its 30 years of existence, Carl Hartwell's company had built dozens of residential complexes throughout the state of Oregon, but the last 2 years had been increasingly difficult. Carl sat at his massive oak desk, studying financial reports. 52 years old, graying temples, hands calloused from a youth spent on construction sites. Now those hands trembled over the calculator. The numbers didn't lie. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. "Dad, we have a problem with the contractors at the Beaverton site." Emily entered the office without knocking, as usual. 28 years old, her chestnut hair pulled back in a businesslike bun, her suit strict but elegant. After her divorce a year ago, she had thrown herself into her work, becoming her father's indispensable right-hand woman. "What kind of problems?" Carl didn't look up from his documents. "They're demanding prepayment for materials. They say they won't work without money up front." Emily sat down across from her father. "And it's not just them. The bank called about a late loan payment." Carl finally looked up. Weariness was evident in his eyes. "How much do we need?" "At least $200,000 for the next month, but that's just to stay afloat." There was a knock at the door. Stefan Stone entered with plans under his arm and a cup of coffee in his hand. 35 years old, tall, athletic, with carefully styled dark hair. His architectural firm, Stone Design, had been working with Hartwell Construction for 5 years, and during that time, they had become not just business partners, but friends. "Good morning. I brought the new drawings for the Lake Oswego project." Stefan laid the plans on the table. "The client has made some changes." Emily couldn't help but notice how confidently he moved, how his fingers glided over the drawings. After her divorce, she tried not to pay attention to men, but something about Stefan always made her heart beat a little faster. "Stefan, we need to talk," Carl said in a serious tone. "About finances." Stefan sat down, his face tense. "Is it that bad?" "Worse. The bank may demand early repayment of the loan. We have a month at most." For the next 2 hours, they discussed possible options. Stefan offered to defer his fees. Emily drew up a savings plan, and Carl called potential investors, but everyone knew it wasn't enough. "What if we sell part of the company?" Stefan suggested. "I know a few investors who are interested in the construction business." Carl shook his head. "This is a family business. My father founded it in 1995. I can't." "Dad, maybe we should consider this option," Emily said gently. "It's better to lose some control than to lose everything." Emily and Stefan's eyes met. In his eyes, she saw understanding and support. Something inside her responded to that look. That evening, Emily stayed late at the office, sorting through documents. Stefan also stayed behind, finishing up some drawings. They found themselves alone in the dimly lit building. "Tough day," Stefan said, approaching her desk. "Yes. Sometimes it feels like we're sinking, and I don't know how to save the ship." "You're doing everything you can. Your father is proud of you." "I'm not sure. After the divorce, I feel like a failure at everything." Stefan sat down on the edge of her desk. "Divorce isn't the end of the world. Sometimes it's a new beginning." Silence hung between them. Emily felt his closeness, the scent of his cologne mingling with the aroma of coffee. She looked up and met his gaze. Something changed in the air between them. "Stefan," she began. "I know," he said quietly. "I feel it too." Their lips were almost touching when the door burst open. Carl entered the office. "Oh, you're still here," he said, not noticing the tension. "Stefan, I've been thinking about your suggestion about investors. Maybe we should meet with them." Emily quickly moved away from Stefan, her cheeks flushed. Stefan stood up, trying to look natural. "Sure, Carl. I'll contact them tomorrow morning." At home, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about that moment in the office. about how close they had been, about what might have happened if her father hadn't walked in. Stefan was her father's partner. It was wrong, dangerous, but she couldn't deny how she felt. On the other side of town, Stefan was also awake. He stood at the window of his apartment, looking at the lights of Portland and thinking about Emily, about her eyes, about how she bit her lip when she was nervous, about how they almost kissed. He knew he was playing with fire. Carl trusted him not only as a partner, but also as a friend. But Emily was special. Ever since she got divorced, Stefan couldn't think about anyone else. Meanwhile, in their family home in the suburbs of Portland, Sarah Hartwell was finishing her second glass of wine in front of the TV. Carl still hadn't come home. He was stuck at the office again dealing with financial problems. Their marriage was held together only by habit. Sarah knew about the financial difficulties, but she felt useless. The only thing that helped drown out the loneliness was wine. When Carl finally came home at 10:30, he found his wife asleep in her chair in front of the TV. An empty bottle stood on the coffee table. He covered her with a blanket and quietly went up to his bedroom. Tomorrow would be a new day full of problems. But he didn't know that the most serious problems were just beginning. A week had passed since that evening at the office. Emily and Stefan tried to behave professionally, but the tension between them grew with each passing day. Every casual glance, every touch of the hand when passing documents, sent electric shocks through them. The meeting with potential investors was scheduled for Tuesday at a fashionable restaurant in downtown Portland. Carl put on his best suit, but still looked tense. Emily chose a strict black dress, businesslike, but emphasizing her figure. Thomas Grayson and his partners are serious people, Stefan explained on the way. They have already invested in several construction projects on the West Coast. At the restaurant, they were greeted by a tall man in his 60s with a gray beard and attentive gray eyes. He was accompanied by two younger partners in identical dark suits. "Carl, nice to meet you," Grayson said, shaking his hand. "Stefan told me about your projects, an impressive portfolio." The lunch took place in a business-like atmosphere. Grayson asked pointed questions about the company's financial condition, development plans, and market position. Carl answered honestly, realizing there was no point in hiding anything. "Your company has a good reputation," Grayson finally said, "but the market is tough. We need guarantees of a return on our investment." "What exactly are your terms?" Emily asked. 51% of the shares in exchange for $2 million, plus veto power on major decisions. Carl turned pale. "That means losing control of my own company. But the company will survive," Grayson replied harshly. "Think about it. You have a week." After the investors left, a heavy silence hung in the car. "Dad, maybe we should agree?" Emily suggested cautiously. "Easy to say when you haven't spent 30 years building this," Carl replied sharply. Stefan, sitting in the back seat, said quietly, "There are other options. I can talk to other investors. What will happen to our partnership?" Carl turned to him. "If we sell control, the new owners may find another architect." "I've thought about that." Stefan paused. "Maybe I should look for new opportunities too." Emily felt a twinge in her chest. The thought of Stefan leaving was unbearable. The atmosphere at home that evening was no better. Sarah greeted her husband with a new bottle of wine in her hands. "How did the meeting with your saviors go?" Her speech was slightly slurred. "Sarah, please, not now." "Not now? When then? When we lose our house? When you finally tell me what's going on?" Carl walked past his wife to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. "They're offering to buy a controlling stake. What's wrong with that? The money will solve our problems. The company will cease to be a family business. Everything my father worked for will be gone." Sarah finished her wine and poured herself another. "Your father died 10 years ago, Carl. Maybe it's time to live for the living?" Meanwhile, Emily was sitting in her apartment in the Pearl District, trying to focus on her work. But her thoughts kept returning to Stefan, to his words about seeking new opportunities. Her phone rang. "Stefan." Hi, can we talk? About what? Better not on the phone. Can we meet? Half an hour later, they were sitting in a quiet cafe in Hawthorne. Rain tapped on the windows, creating an intimate atmosphere. Emily, I have something to say, Stefan said, nervously twirling his coffee cup. What's happening between us is complicating things. Nothing is happening, she lied. We both know that's not true. He looked her in the eyes. I think about you every minute, about that night in the office, about what could have happened. Emily's heart beat faster. Stefan, I know it's wrong. Your father trusts me, but I can't pretend I don't feel anything anymore. Emily reached out and touched his fingers. I can't either. They looked at each other in silence. Then Stefan gently intertwined their fingers. What are we doing? She whispered. I don't know, but I don't want to hide my feelings anymore. They sat in the cafe until late in the evening, talking about life, dreams, the past. Stefan told her about his divorce 3 years ago, how work had become his only outlet. Emily shared the pain of her divorce, her feelings of failure, her fear of never finding true love. You're not a failure, he said, when they finally left the cafe. You're a strong, smart, beautiful woman. They stood under a streetlight. The rain finally stopped. Stefan gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. Emily. This time, nothing interrupted them. The kiss was tender but passionate. All the forbidden feelings they had suppressed poured out in that moment. When they finally parted, they both knew there was no turning back. The next day, the atmosphere in the office was electric. Carl pored over documents, preparing for negotiations with the bank. Emily and Stefan tried to act normal, but something had changed between them. Their glances, smiles, and accidental touches all meant more now. During lunch break, Sarah unexpectedly showed up at the office. She rarely came here, preferring to stay at home. Is Carl at the negotiations? She asked Emily. Yes, at the bank. He'll be back in an hour. Sarah sat down in the chair opposite her daughter. Her eyes were slightly red, but she looked sober. Emily, I need to talk to you. About what? About you. You've changed lately. Emily felt uneasy. What do you mean? You're glowing. Like you're in love. Sarah looked closely at her daughter. Is there someone? At that moment, Stefan entered the office with a folder of documents. Seeing Sarah, he smiled. Sarah, what a pleasant surprise. Sarah followed her daughter's gaze and noticed Emily blush slightly at the sight of Stefan. Something clicked in her head. Stefan, how are you? How's your personal life? Everything's fine, thank you. Stefan seemed slightly embarrassed. Are you seeing anyone? Mom? Emily exclaimed. Just curious, Sarah replied innocently, but her eyes closely studied the reaction of both. After Sarah left, Stefan and Emily exchanged worried glances. Do you think she suspects something? Stefan asked quietly. I don't know. Mom can be very perceptive sometimes. That evening, Sarah sat at home with a glass of wine, thinking about what she had seen. Emily and Stefan's glances, their tension when she asked questions, the way her daughter blushed. She finished her wine and poured another glass. If her suspicions were correct, it could destroy her family. Carl would never forgive the betrayal of his best friend. Meanwhile, Carl was returning from the bank with bad news. The bank had refused to extend their line of credit. They had 1 month left before the debt was due in full. When he entered the house, Sarah was asleep in an armchair, an empty bottle beside her. Her phone was on the coffee table, open to Stefan's social media page. Carl picked up the phone to put it away and accidentally saw a photo. Stefan was in the same cafe where he had been with Emily yesterday. The photo had been taken a few hours ago. Carl frowned. Why hadn't Stefan said he was planning to be in that area? They had agreed to meet at the office after his negotiations at the bank. He put the phone down and covered his wife with a blanket. Tomorrow, he would have a talk with Stefan. Too many strange things had been happening lately. Meanwhile, in their apartments, Emily and Stefan couldn't sleep, thinking about each other and what lay ahead. They had crossed the line and now had to decide what to do next. The secret they were hiding was becoming heavier with each passing day. The next 2 weeks passed in an atmosphere of tension, secrecy, and passion. Emily and Stefan met after work in small cafes on the outskirts of Portland, far from familiar eyes. Their relationship developed rapidly, from timid kisses to passionate embraces in Stefan's car in deserted parking lots. "This is crazy," Emily whispered, pressing herself against him in his black BMW at the overlook above the Willamette River. The city lights twinkled below, creating a romantic atmosphere. "I know," Stefan replied, kissing her neck, "but I can't stop." "I don't want to," Emily pulled away and looked him in the eyes. "What will happen when my father finds out?" "I don't know, but I'm willing to risk everything for you." His words sounded sincere, but Emily saw a shadow of doubt in his eyes. She knew that Stefan valued his relationship with her father not only as a business partner, but also as a friend. At the office, they continued to play the role of professional colleagues, but the tension was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. Carl noticed their glances, their accidental touches, how nervous they both were when they were in the same room. Meanwhile, the financial situation was deteriorating. Carl was forced to lay off 3 workers and postpone 2 projects. Grayson's offer to buy a controlling stake hung over the family like the sword of Damocles. "We have 10 days left to respond to the bank," Carl said during the weekly meeting. "If we don't find the money, the company will go bankrupt." "Dad, maybe we should accept Grayson's offer," Emily suggested cautiously. "What do you think, Stefan?" Carl turned to his partner. Stefan paused, considering his answer. "To be honest, Carl, I'm thinking about alternatives." "What exactly?" "Maybe I should buy out your share of the company." "I could find the financing." Carl froze. "You want to buy my company?" "Our company? We're partners." "Partners don't buy each other out, Stefan, especially when one of them is in a difficult situation." Emily felt the atmosphere in the room heat up. "Dad, maybe Stefan is just trying to help." "Don't interfere, Emily. This is a conversation between men." Stefan stood up from the table. "Carl, I don't want to take advantage of your difficulties, but the reality is that the company needs money. Fast, and you just happen to find it?" "I have connections. Investors who are willing to finance promising projects." Carl looked at Stefan suspiciously. "Why didn't you suggest this before?" "Because I didn't want to ruin our partnership. But now, we have no choice." After Stefan left, Carl sat in his office for a long time, thinking about his partner's words. Something about his behavior seemed strange. Too many coincidences, too many convenient solutions. That evening at home, Sarah greeted her husband with the familiar glass of wine in her hands. But this time, she was more sober than usual. "Carl, we need to talk." "About what?" "About Emily." And Stefan. Carl stopped, taking off his jacket. "What do you mean?" "I think there's something between them." "Don't be silly, Sarah. Stefan is my partner." Emily couldn't what? Fall in love with a handsome man? "Carl, I don't drink enough to be blind to the obvious." Carl sat down opposite his wife. "What makes you think that?" "The way they look at each other. The way they behave when they're in the same room. Emily glows when he's around, and Stefan doesn't look at her like he's looking at his partner's daughter." "Even if that's true, what do you suggest we do?" "Talk to them." Before things get worse, Carl shook his head. "You're exaggerating. Stefan wouldn't betray my trust, but the seed of doubt had been planted." Over the next few days, Carl watched his daughter and his partner closely, and what he saw confirmed his worst fears. Friday evening. Emily told her father she was staying late at the office to work on some paperwork. Carl decided to stop by to pick up some forgotten papers and saw Stefan hugging his daughter near her car in the parking lot. Carl sat in his car, unable to believe his eyes. Stefan was kissing Emily, and she was responding with obvious passion. This lasted several minutes, then they got into Stefan's car and drove away. Carl spent a sleepless night, tormented by betrayal. In the morning, he called Emily into his office. "Sit down," he said in a cold tone. Emily sensed something was wrong. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Last night I saw you with Stefan in the parking lot." His daughter's face turned pale. "Dad, how long has this been going on?" Emily lowered her eyes. "A few weeks." "A few weeks." Carl stood up and paced around the office. "My daughter is having an affair with my business partner, behind my back. It's not just an affair. We love each other." "Love?" Carl turned sharply to his daughter. "You've only known him for 5 years. He's 7 years older than you. He's been through a divorce." "That doesn't matter." "It does, especially when he's my partner and friend." There was a knock at the door. Stefan entered with the morning coffee and saw the tense faces of the father and daughter. "Everything okay?" "Come in, Stefan," Carl said in an icy tone. "I wanted to talk to you." Stefan realized they had been found out. He put the coffee on the table and stood next to Emily. "Carl, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you betrayed my trust? How you used your closeness to the family to seduce my daughter?" "It wasn't like that." "Then how was it?" Carl raised his voice. "Tell me how it was." Stefan took Emily's hand. "We fell in love with each other. It just happened." "Just happened?" "In my office? Behind my back?" "Dad, please," Emily interjected. "We didn't plan this. It just happened." Carl looked at his daughter and her partner's intertwined hands. "Do you realize that this destroys everything? Our partnership, trust in the family?" "Not necessarily," said Stefan. "We can find a way." "What way?" Carl exploded. "Do you think I'm going to work with a man who secretly dates my daughter? Do you think I'm going to trust you with the family business?" "Carl, be reasonable. The company is on the verge of collapse. Now is not the time for personal conflicts." "Not the time?" Carl moved close to Stefan. "You destroyed my family, and you talk about time?" "I didn't destroy your family. I love Emily, and that's why you decided to seduce her behind her father's back?" Emily stepped between them. "Enough. I'm a grown woman. I choose who I want to be with, not when that choice involves my business partner." Stefan moved away to the window, trying to calm down. "Carl, let's discuss this like adults. Yes, we were wrong to hide our relationship, but that doesn't change the fact that the company needs help." "What are you talking about?" "My offer to buy your share. The offer still stands." Carl stared at him. "You're using your relationship with my daughter to buy my company." "No!" "Those are two different things." "Different?" Carl laughed bitterly. "First, you seduce my daughter, then you offer to buy my business. And that's a coincidence?" "Carl, you're wrong. Or maybe it's a plan." Carl approached Stefan. "Maybe you started a relationship with Emily on purpose to gain control of the company." "That's crazy," Emily exclaimed. "Crazy?" Carl turned to his daughter. "Maybe he's using you? Maybe all this talk of love is just a way to get what he wants." Stefan turned pale. "Carl, if that's what you really think, then we have nothing to talk about." "Fine. Then let's end this once and for all." "What do you mean?" Carl walked over to the safe and took out the partnership documents. "I'm terminating our agreement immediately." "Dad, don't do it," Emily cried. "You can't just terminate the agreement," Stefan said. "There are terms and conditions, obligations." "I can. There's a clause about breach of trust between partners. Your affair with my daughter falls under that definition." Stefan looked intently at Carl. "Are you sure you want to do this? Without me, your company will go bankrupt in a week. Better bankruptcy than betrayal." "Fine." Stefan took his documents. "But remember, I have contracts for 3 major projects that I brought in. Without me, you'll lose them. Are you threatening me? I'm stating a fact. The clients work with me, not with the company. Carl realized that Stefan was right. Losing the projects meant not just bankruptcy, but the complete destruction of the business. What do you want? He asked quietly. Stefan looked at Emily, then at Carl. I want to buy the company. For a fair price. And I want Emily to work with me. What if I refuse? Then I'll take my projects and start my own construction company, with Emily as my partner. Emily looked at her father, then at Stefan. Stefan, what are you doing? What I have to do. Carl, you have a choice. Sell me the company and keep at least something, or lose everything and be left with nothing. Is that an ultimatum? It's reality. You have 3 days to think about it. Stefan took Emily's hand. Let's go. Your father needs time to think. Emily, if you leave with him now, don't come back, Carl said. Emily stopped at the door, torn between her father and the man she loved. Dad, choose. Family, or him. Emily looked at Stefan, who was waiting for her decision. Then at her father, whose face expressed pain and anger. I'm sorry, she whispered, and left with Stefan. Carl remained alone in his office, listening to the sound of the car driving away. 30 years of building a business, 28 years of raising a daughter, all crumbled in an instant. He sat down at his desk and took a bottle of whiskey from the bottom drawer. For the first time in many years, Carl got drunk right in his office, thinking about how his best friend and beloved daughter had betrayed him at the most difficult moment of his life. In Stefan's car, Emily cried, realizing that she had chosen love but lost her family. Everything will be fine, Stefan comforted her. Your father will cool down and realize he has no choice. But even he wasn't sure of his words. Too much was at stake, and the price of a mistake could be fatal. Monday, March 22nd, 2025. It had been raining since morning, turning the streets of Portland into gray rivers. The atmosphere in the Hartwells' suburban home was oppressive. Carl hadn't slept at home. Sarah found him in the morning at the office, asleep at his desk surrounded by empty whiskey bottles. Carl, it's time to go home, she said as she entered the office. He lifted his swollen eyes. There is no home anymore. There are only ruins. Emily called. She wants to talk. There's nothing to talk about. She made her choice. Sarah walked to the window overlooking the parking lot where, 3 days ago, she had seen her daughter and Stefan kiss goodbye. Have you made yours? What choice do I have? Sell the company to the man who destroyed my family or lose everything? There's a third option. Carl looked at his wife. What is it? Fight. Find other investors. Show Stefan that you're not giving up. There's no time for that. I have 1 day left to respond to the bank. Meanwhile, Emily sat in Stefan's apartment in downtown Portland, watching the rain outside the window. The last 3 days had been a nightmare. She hadn't slept or eaten, tormented by guilt and doubt. Do you regret your decision? Stefan asked, bringing her coffee. I don't know. I betrayed my father. The man who took care of me my whole life. You chose your happiness. There's nothing wrong with that. What if he's right? What if you're really using me to get the company? Stefan sat down next to her and took her hands. Emily, look at me. I love you. The company is a business. Love is something more, then don't buy it. Find another way to help your father. I can't. It's too late. Your father has declared war. Now one of us has to win. At the company's office, Carl met with a lawyer to explore the possibilities of terminating his partnership agreement with Stefan. The documents lay on the table, full of legal terms and complex wording. Termination is possible, said the lawyer, an elderly man with glasses. But Stefan may demand compensation for his share. How much? About $800,000. Carl laughed bitterly. I don't have 800,000. I don't have anything at all. Then consider his offer to buy. It might be worth negotiating. I won't negotiate with a man who betrayed my trust. At 5 in the evening, Stefan arrived at the office for a final conversation. The secretary had already gone home, and only Carl and the security guard remained in the building. "Time's up, Carl," Stefan said as he entered the office. "What's your decision?" "Go to hell." Very businesslike. "So it's war?" Carl stood up from behind his desk. "War. I'll find a way to save the company without your help." "How?" "You have no money, no time, no support. Even your daughter is on my side. Don't you dare mention Emily." "Why?" "She's a grown woman. She chose who to be with." Carl walked around the desk, approaching Stefan. "You deceived her. You took advantage of her feelings, just like you used her labor in your company. How many years did she work for pennies because you called it family duty?" "Those are different things." "No, Carl. It's the same thing. We both used Emily for our own purposes. The difference is that I'm offering her a future." Carl's anger reached its limit. "What future? You destroyed her relationship with her family. I freed her from a family that kept her in a cage." Carl grabbed Stefan by the lapels of his jacket. "Get out! Get out before I do something I can't take back." Stefan broke free from his grip. "Are you threatening me, Carl?" "I'm warning you." "Fine. But remember, tomorrow morning the bank will demand repayment of the loan, and I have contracts worth $1.5 million that I'm taking with me." Stefan headed for the door but stopped at the threshold. "By the way, Emily has agreed to be my partner in the new company. We'll announce it tomorrow." After Stefan left, Carl remained alone in the dimly lit office. His hands trembled with rage and helplessness. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and took out a gun, an old Smith & Wesson revolver he kept for protection against burglars. The metal was cold and heavy in his hand. Carl stared at the weapon for a long time, wondering how far he was willing to go to protect what he had built his entire life. At 6:30, he put the gun back and drove home. Sarah met him in the kitchen, soberer than usual. "How did the conversation with Stefan go?" "Bad. He's taking the projects, and Emily." "What are you going to do?" Carl sat down at the kitchen table, feeling old. "I don't know. For the first time in my life, I don't know." Sarah sat down across from him. "I called Emily this afternoon." "And?" "She's ready to come home if you forgive her." Carl looked up. "What about Stefan?" "She didn't mention him. So she's still with him." "Not necessarily. Maybe she realizes she made a mistake." At that moment, another conversation was taking place in Stefan's apartment. Emily sat on the sofa, hugging her knees, while Stefan paced around the living room. "Your father refused the deal," he said. "I expected that. Tomorrow I will announce the opening of a new company, Stone and Associates. You will be my partner." Emily looked up. "What if I refuse?" Stefan stopped. "Why would you refuse?" "Because it will destroy my family for good." "Emily, your family is already destroyed. Your father chose pride over common sense, and you chose business over compromise." Stefan walked to the window. "I offered him a fair deal. He refused. Fair to whom? You knew he couldn't give up the company. It's his life. Then he should have thought about that before declaring war on me." Emily stood up and walked over to Stefan. "I want to talk to my father. Try to find a solution. It's too late tonight. He's probably drinking. Then tomorrow morning. Tomorrow will be too late. The bank will demand the money at 10 in the morning." At 9 in the evening, Emily arrived at her parents' house. She sat in the car for a long time, gathering her courage. The house where she had grown up, where she had spent her childhood, seemed strange and cold. Finally, she got out of the car and walked to the door. Sarah opened it almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for her. "Emily." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Hi, Mom." "Is Dad home?" "In his study. He's been drinking since this morning." Emily walked down the familiar hallway to her father's study. The door was ajar. Carl was sitting in a chair with his back to the door, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Dad?" He turned slowly. His face was gaunt, his eyes red from alcohol and tears. "Why are you here?" "To talk. To find a solution." "What solution?" "You chose him." Emily sat down in the chair opposite him. "I chose love, but I don't want to lose my family." "You can't sit on two chairs, Emily. We can find a compromise. Stefan is willing to discuss the terms. Stefan wants my company. And you as a bonus, that's not true." Carl finished his whiskey and poured another. "Then how?" "Explain to me how a man who was my friend for 5 years could seduce my daughter." "No one seduced anyone. We fell in love." "Fell in love," Carl repeated bitterly. "And the fact that he's my partner doesn't matter? The heart doesn't care what a person's profession is. So if you fell in love with my enemy, you would choose him too?" Emily didn't answer. Carl stood up and walked to the window. "Go away, Emily. It hurts me to look at you. Dad, go away and tell your lover that I'll find a way to stop him." Emily left the house in tears. Her mother walked her to the car. "Give him time," Sarah said. "He'll cool down." "I don't know, Mom. He said he'd stop Stefan." "What do you mean?" "I don't know, but I'm scared." At 10:30 in the evening, Stefan received a text message from Emily. "The conversation didn't work out. Dad is threatening you. Be careful." Stefan put his phone away and poured himself some wine. He wasn't afraid of Carl's threats. An elderly businessman against a young and successful architect. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Stefan's phone rang. It was Carl. "We need to meet," Carl said. His voice was sober but strangely calm. "Now?" "Carl, it's late. At the office. In half an hour." "Why?" "I have a proposal." Stefan hesitated. "What kind of proposal?" "Come and find out." The connection was cut off. Stefan stared at the phone for a long time. Something in Carl's voice alarmed him, but curiosity got the better of him. At 1:30 in the morning, Stefan arrived at the Hartwell construction office. The building was dark, with only the light on in Carl's office window. Stefan parked next to Carl's car and went up to the second floor. The office door was open. Carl was sitting at his desk with documents and a gun in front of him. "Carl, what is this?" "Sit down, Stefan. Put the gun away." "Sit down," I said. Stefan slowly sat down in the chair opposite the desk, keeping his eyes on the gun. "You wanted my company," Carl said. "You'll get it." "What are you talking about?" Carl put his hand on the gun. "I signed a will. In the event of my death, the company goes to Emily, and Emily will be with you. Carl, don't do anything stupid. You'll get what you wanted. The company and my daughter, and I'll get peace. Listen, we can discuss everything. It's too late to discuss. You ruined my life. Now it's my turn." Carl took the gun in his hands. Stefan tensed, ready to throw himself forward. "Just one condition," Carl continued. "You marry Emily. Make her happy. Carl, promise me." "I promise." Carl nodded and aimed the gun. The shot rang out in the night silence like thunder in a clear sky. At 2:47 a.m., the Portland police dispatcher received a call about shots fired in an industrial area. The first patrol car arrived 8 minutes later. Detective James Collins arrived at the scene at 3:15 a.m. Collins, a 45-year-old police veteran with 20 years of experience, had seen a lot, but this scene made him pause in the doorway of the office. The body lay behind a desk in a pool of blood. A .38 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol lay nearby. On the desk were documents, a bottle of whiskey, and 2 glasses. "What do we have?" Collins asked Sergeant Miller, the first to arrive at the scene. "A gunshot wound to the head, a gun next to the body, possibly suicide." Possibly, Collins agreed, putting on his gloves. Or maybe not. He examined the desk. The documents were neatly arranged. A will, insurance policies, business papers. Too neat for someone who was about to kill himself. 2 glasses, the detective noted. Someone was here with the victim. Maybe he drank alone but used a clean glass. Collins held one of the glasses up to the light. There were traces of whiskey on the bottom and a faint lip print on the rim. No, someone was definitely here. The forensic team began their work at the scene. Photographs, fingerprints, blood spatter analysis. Meanwhile, Collins studied the documents on the table. The will was signed today, he told his assistant, in favor of the daughter, Emily Hartwell. A motive for suicide or for murder? Find out the daughter's address. We need to talk to the family. At 4:30 a.m., Collins and Sergeant Miller arrived at the Hartwells' house in the suburbs. The windows were dark, but the detective noticed a faint light in one of the rooms. Sarah Hartwell opened the door in her bathrobe. Her eyes were red, her face swollen from crying. Mrs. Hartwell? Detective Collins, Portland Police. May I come in? Sarah stepped aside, letting the police officers into the house. Carl, has something happened to him? I'm afraid so. Your husband is dead. Sarah sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. How? A gunshot to the head, in his office. Oh my God, he was threatening him, but I didn't think. Threatening? Who? Sarah looked up through her tears. Stephen Stone. His partner Collins sat down opposite her. Tell me about these threats. Stefan was having an affair with our daughter. Carl found out and kicked them both out. Tonight he said he would find a way to stop Stefan. Where is your daughter now? At Stefan's. In his apartment downtown. Address? Sarah dictated the address. Collins wrote it down in his notebook. Mrs. Hartwell, when was the last time you saw your husband alive? Last night, around 9. Emily came over to talk to him. After she left, Carl was very upset. Did he talk about suicide? No, he talked about revenge. At 5:15 a.m., the detectives arrived at an upscale residential complex in downtown Portland. The concierge reluctantly gave them the number of Stefan Stone's apartment. Collins pressed the doorbell. No one answered. He rang again, longer this time. Finally, the door opened. Stefan stood in the doorway in his pajamas, his hair tousled, his eyes sleepy. Detective Collins, Portland Police. May I come in? What's going on? Carl Hartwell is dead. Stefan's face paled. What do you mean? A gunshot to the head. In his office, Stefan stepped back, letting the detectives into the apartment. When did this happen? Between midnight and 2 in the morning. Where were you at that time? At home. Asleep. Can anyone confirm that? Stefan hesitated. Emily was with me. Mr. Stone, did you meet with Mr. Hartwell last night? Yes, in his office, around 5 o'clock. What did you talk about? Business. He refused to sell me his share of the company. How did he react to the refusal? He was angry. Very angry. Emily came out of the bedroom in her nightgown. When she saw the police, she stopped. Emily, your father, Stefan began. Miss Hartwell? Detective Collins. I'm very sorry to inform you of your father's death. Emily sank down onto the sofa, her face turning white as chalk. How? A gunshot. Possibly suicide. No, she whispered. He wouldn't have. Miss Hartwell, where were you after midnight tonight? Here. With Stefan, you didn't leave the apartment? No. Collins wrote down the statement in his notebook. Mr. Stone, your phone number? Stefan dictated the number. The detective checked his notes. Strange. The last outgoing call on Mr. Hartwell's phone was to your number. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Stefan froze. Yes, he called. And what did he want? He said he had a proposal. He asked to meet Did you agree? Pause. Emily looked intently at Stefan. No, I said we'd talk in the morning. I see. Collins closed his notebook. We'll talk more later. Don't leave town. After the police left, Emily stared at Stefan for a long time. Did you tell the truth? Of course. Then why are you so nervous? Stefan turned away toward the window. Your father is dead. The police suspect murder. I have reason to be nervous, but Emily could see that he was hiding something, and that frightened her more than her father's death. At the police station, Collins studied the initial results of the forensic examination. The fingerprints on the gun belonged to Carl Hartwell, but the second glass had someone else's fingerprints on it. Stefan Stone is lying, he told Sergeant Miller. He was with the victim on the night of the murder. So it was murder? Possibly. Or Stefan was the last person to see Hartwell alive and is afraid of becoming a suspect. What next? Collins looked at his watch. 7:30 a.m. The workday was just beginning, and he already had a murder case with 3 suspects: the widow, the daughter, and the business partner. Next, we find out which one of them is the killer. Tuesday, March 23rd, 9 a.m. Detective Collins sat in his office, studying the Hartwell case file. In front of him were photos from the crime scene, witness statements, and the preliminary report from the forensic team. Sergeant Miller entered with new documents. We got Stefan Stone's phone records for the last 2 days. Collins took the printouts and studied them carefully. Interesting. At 1:03 a.m., an incoming call from Carl Hartwell, duration 3 minutes 47 seconds. At 1:47 a.m., an outgoing call to Emily Hartwell, 45 seconds. So, he did talk to the victim after all. And then he called Emily right away. Why? Collins glanced at his watch. Bring Stefan Stone in for questioning, officially. At 10:30, Stefan sat in the interrogation room, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. Collins entered with a folder of documents and a tape recorder. Mr. Stone, do you understand that you are giving testimony under oath? Yes. Good. Tell me about your relationship with Carl Hartwell. Stefan sighed. We were business partners for 5 years. At first it was just work, then we became friends. At least, I thought so. What changed? I fell in love with his daughter. And how did Carl react? Badly. Very badly. He called it betrayal. Collins opened a folder and took out a printout of phone calls. Mr. Stone, yesterday you said that Carl called you at 1 in the morning, but you refused to meet him. Is that true? Stefan hesitated. Yes. Then explain to me why the conversation lasted almost 4 minutes? Silence. Stefan looked at the printout, realizing he had been caught in a lie. And why did you call Emily right after talking to Carl? I wanted to warn her. About what? That her father was acting strangely. Collins leaned forward. Mr. Stone, I'll give you one more chance to tell the truth. Did you meet with Carl Hartwell on the night of his death? A long pause. Stefan closed his eyes. Yes, I did. Tell me what happened. Stefan took a deep breath. Carl called and said he had a proposal. He asked me to come to the office. I didn't want to, but curiosity got the better of me. What time did you arrive? Around 1:30. What did you see there? Carl was sitting at his desk. There was a gun in front of him. Collins tensed. Did he threaten you? Not right away. First he said he had signed a will in favor of Emily. That in the event of his death, I would get the company through her, and then he took the gun and said he would kill himself. But only if I promised to marry Emily. And what did you say? I said I would. I thought that would calm him down. But it didn't? Stefan shook his head. He pointed the gun at me. He said I had ruined his life, and now he was going to ruin mine. Collins took notes, his eyes fixed on Stefan. What happened next? I tried to stop him, I lunged at him. We wrestled for the gun, and there was a shot. Stefan covered his face with his hands. When I realized what had happened, Carl was dead. Why didn't you call the police? I was scared. I knew it looked like murder. I had a motive. The company, Emily. Who would believe me? So you staged a suicide? I didn't stage anything. I just left. I figured if it looked like suicide, then let it stay that way. Collins leaned back in his chair. Mr. Stone, do you understand that you're telling me about concealing evidence and leaving the scene of a crime? I do. And possibly murder. Stefan raised his head sharply. It wasn't murder. It was self-defense. We'll find out. At 1 o'clock, Collins met with District Attorney Martha Davis. An experienced woman in her 50s, she listened to the case carefully and without emotion. What evidence do we have besides the confession? She asked. Stefan's fingerprints on the second glass. Phone records confirming the meeting. The motive is inheritance and the company through his relationship with his daughter. What does the gun expert say? The gun belonged to Hartwell, registered to him, but the angle of the bullet entry is not consistent with suicide. Davis nodded. The nature of the wound? A shot to the right temple, but Hartwell was right-handed. If he had committed suicide, he would have shot himself in the left temple or in the mouth. Enough for an arrest, but we need additional evidence for the trial. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Collins returned to the interrogation room. Stefan was sitting with his lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit. Mr. Stone, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Carl Hartwell. The lawyer stood up. Detective, my client is cooperating with the investigation. Your client lied to the police and concealed evidence. He admitted to self-defense. Collins looked at Stefan. Tell me again about the struggle for the gun. Carl pointed the gun at me. I instinctively lunged at him. We fell, and the gun ended up between us. During the struggle, the trigger was accidentally pulled. Where exactly were you when the shot was fired? Near the table. Carl was lying under it. Collins opened a folder with photos of the crime scene. But the body was found behind the table, in a chair. How did it get there? Stefan froze. I may not remember correctly. It was dark, and I was in shock. Or you're lying. Again. The lawyer put his hand on his client's shoulder. We declined to testify further. That evening, Collins went to see Emily. She was now living with her mother in her parents' house. Sarah opened the door, her eyes red from crying. How is she holding up? Asked the detective. Not well. She's not eating or sleeping. She blames herself for her father's death. Emily was sitting in the living room, staring at a single point. When she saw Collins, she looked up. Was Stefan arrested? Yes. Did he really kill Dad? Collins sat down opposite her. Miss Hartwell, are you sure Stefan was with you the whole night? I was asleep. I woke up when you knocked. You didn't hear him leaving the apartment? Emily hesitated. Maybe. I thought it was the neighbors. What time was that? Around 1 in the morning. This contradicted Stefan's statement about the time of his meeting with Carl. Miss Hartwell, Stefan called you after talking to your father. What did he say? He said Dad wanted to meet with him. I asked him not to go, but he didn't listen. Did he say why they were meeting? Dad promised him some kind of offer. Collins wrote down the testimony. What did Stefan say to you when he came back? Nothing. He went to bed and said he'd tell me in the morning. Did he seem upset? Yes, very. His hands were shaking. The next day, Collins received the full report from the forensic team. Analysis of the blood spatter showed that the shot had been fired from close range, but not point blank. The victim had been sitting at a table. Furthermore, microscopic drops of Carl Hartwell's blood were found on Stefan's jacket sleeve. This would not have been the case in self-defense or an accidental shooting. He's lying, Collins told District Attorney Davis. This was cold-blooded murder. Can you prove it? The physical evidence speaks for itself. Plus the motive, the false testimony, the concealment of evidence. Fine. We're charging you with first-degree murder. Thursday, March 25th. Stefan was sitting in his prison cell when his lawyer came to see him. The prosecution isn't accepting a plea bargain, said the defense attorney. You're charged with first-degree murder. You're facing life in prison. That's crazy. It was self-defense. Then tell me the truth. The whole truth. Stefan was silent for a long time. Then he spoke quietly. Carl wasn't going to shoot himself. He was planning to kill me. Explain. He called and said he was ready to sell me the company. When I arrived, he was sitting there with a gun and some documents. He said I had destroyed his family, and now he was going to destroy my life. Go on. He wanted me to sign the documents to buy the company for a nominal sum. After my death, he said he would kill me and then shoot himself. It would look like a mutual murder. The lawyer recorded the testimony. And what did you do? I refused to sign. I said Emily would never forgive him for that. Then he pointed the gun at me. Did you attack him? No. He fired but missed. The bullet went past my head. Then I lunged at him. And? We fought. I tried to take the gun away from him. During the struggle, he hit his head on the edge of the table and lost consciousness. The lawyer looked up from his notebook. Was he alive? Stefan closed his eyes. Yes, but I knew that if he came to, he would kill me. So you shot him? So I defended myself. That's murder, Stefan. Not self-defense. He wanted to kill me. I had no choice. Friday, March 26th. Collins received the results of the gunpowder residue analysis on the victim's hands. Carl Hartwell did not fire a gun on the night of his death. This definitively disproved the theory of suicide or an accidental discharge during a struggle. The detective went to Emily's for a final conversation. She looked haggard, aged several years in the last few days. Miss Hartwell, your father did not fire a gun on the night of his death. Stefan killed him in cold blood. Emily nodded, unsurprised. I knew. How? Stefan couldn't have survived a fight with Dad. Dad was stronger, bigger. If they had really fought over the gun, Stefan would have been injured. Why didn't you say so before? I hoped I was wrong. That he really loved me. Collins sat down beside her. And now I realize he used me from the beginning. Dad was right. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I killed my own father by choosing this man. No, you're not to blame for choosing Stefan, I am. If I hadn't fallen in love with him, Dad would still be alive. Sarah hugged her daughter. Emily, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them. Monday, March 29th. The trial for the murder of Carl Hartwell. Stefan sat at the defendant's table in a prison uniform, his lawyer whispering something in his ear. Prosecutor Davis presented the jury with compelling evidence: motive, false testimony, physical evidence, and the absence of gunpowder residue on the victim's hands. Emily testified against Stefan, recounting his lies and manipulations. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly and convincingly. I loved him, she said, but now I realized that I loved an illusion, the person he pretended to be. The defense tried to prove self-defense, but the evidence was too obvious. The jury reached a verdict in 4 hours, guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Stefan Stone to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was announced, Emily met Collins in the courtroom hallway. Thank you, she said, for the truth. I'm sorry for your losses. I lost my father and the man I loved. But I found myself. 3 months later, Emily and Sarah sold Hartwell Construction to a group of investors from Seattle. The money allowed them to pay off all their debts and start a new life. Sarah began treatment for alcohol addiction. Emily got a job as a project manager at a large architectural firm in Portland. Do you think Dad would forgive me? Emily asked one evening. He loved you, Sarah replied. Fathers always forgive their daughters. Stefan was serving his sentence in an Oregon state prison. Emily never visited him. He sometimes sent letters, but she didn't read them. Hartwell Construction had been in business for 30 years. It now went by a different name, but the houses Carl had built still stood throughout Oregon, silent monuments to a man who had built an empire with his own hands and lost it to the betrayal of those he trusted most. The Hartwell family's story became a warning about how quickly love can turn into obsession, trust into betrayal, and a family business into a battlefield where the only victim is the truth.